Well, welcome to Justice and Judgment. Once again, I've got retired Lieutenant Colonel Robert McGinnis. Bob, if you don't mind, I'm going to read just a little bio that they've got here for you because I want my audience to be familiar with who you are and what you've accomplished in your life. Retired U.S. Army Lieutenant Colonel Robert McGinnis is a decorated airborne Ranger infantry officer who served in 4 divisions across 3 continents. A West Point graduate with advanced studies at the Naval Postgraduate School in the Army War College. He has advised the Pentagon and Army Secretariat for decades on matters of national security and military strategy. McGinnis is the author of numerous books on national security, culture, and global affairs, a seasoned columnist, and a former Fox News military analyst. He also holds a professional certificate in generative artificial intelligence from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. And for those of you who don't know what that is, that's MIT. So that says a lot. Reflecting his experience at the intersection of emerging technology, global power, and strategic security. Well, Bob, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Chris. Glad to be here.
Well, you've come out with the second book of your trilogy, AI, the Cold War. And what gave you the idea of AI, the Cold War?
Well, it occurred to me after I finished AI for Mankind's Future. And of course, it was published in November of this past year. Well into that process, certainly a year ago, I said, well, that answers the simple question, what is AI?
Right.
And it does it in almost 500 pages with a lot of appendices and the like. But I said, what I need to answer is also the question, who controls artificial intelligence? Okay. So I wrote the second book of the trilogy, which is, of course, the new AI Cold War, which Chris and I are talking about today. Later this summer, I have the third leg of the trilogy, the final algorithm, and it really is anticipating almost prophetically where does AI lead? Does it lead to Revelation 13, as I suspect it might? Does it lead in a very different direction than others are prognosticating or being prophetic about? I think there's a lot there that it does fulfill scripture. We'll have to wait and see, obviously, but I think that when that comes out, we can have a longer discussion.
Well, you've broken the book down from what I could tell. I went through it several times into 4 sections. And in section 1, you talk about Xi Jinping. He quote him as saying AI front line and main battlefield of international competition. And I think about their Belt and Road Initiative. It's they want to, much like Islam, want to control the world. Is that not the case?
Well, the Chinese have always wanted to control the world. And in fact, when they were the quote Middle Kingdom, during all their series of empires for the last 3,500 years, they've had considerable control. But it wasn't until the 19th century when the French and the Brits went in and had the Opium Wars that they really uh, bowed the Chinese, and they became a internal large country, but not externally very powerful. And then, of course, the Japanese took over in 36, I think it was. And it wasn't until Richard Nixon uh, went in there in 72 and awakened them. And then, of course, Bill Clinton welcomed them into the WTO. And then after that, we've seen radical expansion, not only of their economy, which is arguably the largest in the world today, but also their ideology has been fueled by the riches that they've inherited, in part because of the United States and Richard Nixon and the like, certainly Bill Clinton. So today, the Chinese have, you know, global ambitions, and that's why they have the world's largest navy. That is using the various geopolitical mechanisms like the one you mentioned, Belt and Road Initiative, to spread their influence across Africa, Asia, South America. They would take over uh, even Greenland, which they've tried to on a number of occasions. And of course, they've aligned themselves with the Russians, who have a large piece of real estate that connects them as well as Europe. And so the Chinese are ambitious. They intend to occupy the moon, trying to beat Elon Musk and NASA there. They are, of course, see themselves at constant war. Mao Zedong, back in 49, when the People's Republic of China was formed, really put together the concept of irregular warfare. And that meant basically our opposition, the Chinese opposition against everything Western, and they had to use all the tools that were available to them. And so those tools are far beyond just the simple use of the military, which they have a very large military, but also their economy, more recently the cyber world. And of course, they're in a dead heat with the United States on artificial intelligence, in which they hope that they can beat the United States and therefore dominate our collective future. So there's a lot that wrapped into that first section. I talk about not only the Chinese, but the Russians, and they have a different approach. But Vladimir Putin's very serious about controlling artificial intelligence and investing in it. He's, of course, used it in the battlefields in Ukraine. And then, of course, others. Iran has used it, certainly in the war that is ongoing. North Korea is, hitting above its weight class because it has really used artificial intelligence in a way that is pretty nefarious. And then across the rest of the world, everybody is getting aboard. We're talking about approaching 1 billion people working with artificial intelligence, and that number will only grow. And its influence on every sector of life is irrefutable. It may not be as obvious in the less developed part of the world, but in this part of the world, it's in every nit and cranny. And we have to recognize that this is not just an extension of the internet. This is a new way of living, a kind of a operating system of the modern lifestyle. And it's invaded absolutely every aspect of life. So it's something that I dare say that, if you ignore it at great peril to your own person.
Well, yes, I believe it's something we cannot ignore. And we'll get into some of that later about our children and the church and school, our economy. There's all kinds of changes that are right now taking place. You mentioned Russia, and you specifically mentioned them as using AI for information and disinformation. Could you kind of elaborate on that a little bit?
Well, anybody that's been in social media in the last year understands how much artificial intelligence has really generated all sorts of videos and misinformation. I just don't believe anything on social media these days.
Yeah.
You have to verify it with multiple sources to try to determine really what is the truth. Russia, of course, started this years ago, and with the help of the Democrats, of course, in this country, they've been very successful at manipulating information, misinformation, for their own purposes. They do it with their own population, but they do it in elections abroad to include our own, and we have plenty of evidence of that. So uh, it's controlling their people, controlling their enemies or influencing their enemies as best as they can, is really how artificial intelligence has become a premier weapon of the Kremlin and Vladimir Putin.
Well, I'm going to jump down here in my notes. You mentioned deception, and you talk. There's deep fakes, and basically a war on truth. And I agree with you. I get on social media, and I'll see a video posted, and you've kind of got to look at that 3 or 4 times and go, "Wait a minute, that is not real. That is a deep fake. That's artificial intelligence. And to most people who do not are not aware of how that works, they're just going to take it and run with it. That it's just a gospel truth.
Yeah. Well, it's incredibly deceptive. Just a year ago when I was taking the MIT course, their professors were showing us, yeah, kind of what was the old misinformation and the old videos, the old fake stuff, compared to the actual stuff. And, it's virtually today impossible to discern on a well-fabricated AI picture or video than an actual. And I subscribe to a whole bunch of AI websites, and many of them have for years posted actual pictures next to fake pictures. And you really can't tell the difference anymore. The same thing with voice, the same thing with you know certainly reading material, video material, you name it. AI learns every time it does something, it improves, and it is, at a future point, and we may be there already. You really can't discern which is to be believed and which is not, and which explains why the cyber hackers are becoming so effective, and why you have to have multiple ways of authenticating your accounts. Otherwise, you're jeopardizing your own livelihood and your own bank accounts and your own online presence. It There's no end to this, and it will only get worse as we go forward.
Well, I know that a few years back, it might have been 3 or 4 years ago, these people were using AI to copy people's kids and grandkids' voices and saying, "I need money." Somebody's kidnapped me or I'm stranded, and it was believable. And people actually sent money, and so it's getting to where you can't even believe that the person on the other end of the call is the person you're talking to.
And you can't believe it's a person.
Yeah. It-
That's the difficulty. The truth is hard to define today in this uh, ecosystem, and that just makes things far more frightening. And of course, it's invading all the workforces. And if you get a phone call, you're not sure initially,
right.
unless they self-identify, if this is a human or an avatar that has a voice like someone that you know. It's that good, and it is getting so much better all the time.
And I can see that being a national security issue as well.
Well, there's no doubt that in the national security arena, as we've seen played out, certainly in Ukraine and more so in Iran, we see that the use of smart drones that can orchestrate entire swarms of drones, hundreds at a time, and then individually target them
Right.
against an individual or a facility or a moving vehicle, and then ignite them, the suicide drones, upon contact. You know, and that's just part and parcel of, certainly the targeting that we've been doing. I know using Anthropic's Claude with Palantir, which is a targeting mechanism that the Pentagon is able to target very rapidly and change dynamically in route targets for ballistic and drone platforms. And that has really revolutionized how we operate. Now, it's already, as we saw in the Venezuela takedown, as well as here more recently with Iran, we've seen a host of indicators of, just rapid precision planning and as well as targeting. And of course, that has really made this not a cakewalk, but for the military has been incredibly decisive against the Iranian Navy, its ballistic missiles, and especially against its leaders. When you can identify someone by their facial features from long distances away, the irises of their eyes, their gait, their voice. Uh, that's scary stuff. It's not science fiction anymore.
It is scary stuff. And from so some of the articles I've read of yours that you've done op-eds on, and I'm assuming, of course, it was after the book was published, but knowing what we used in this Iranian war, artificial intelligence, I guess my concern is how much of it is making the decisions, and when does it have where does the moral obligation come in to divide or discern between what is a possible target and what calls it off?
Yeah, absolutely a critical question. And I know that the Pentagon has a directive that was written years ago, long before we had usable generative AI, much less agentic, which is what we're mostly talking about here, that said you had to have a human in the loop. Well, the Pentagon argues, Pete Hegseth, General Kane argue that, yeah, there's always a human in the loop. But what happens is the AI is conducting all the analysis and then presenting the decision to the human and just collapsing from many hours or days into seconds, information that the human has to make the call on. That's really crowding the human's ability to think through all the issues that must be dealt with when you're making a decision about killing other human beings or destroying facilities
Right.
or whatever. Uh, so the idea of aut- uh, autonomous vehicles is something that we will wrestle with for some time. I know that President Trump, put out some guidance about AI recently, and I said, there's some very good parts in there that I wholly endorse, but I'm very concerned about what it might do to, domestically, to our liberties, to our privacy, to our
Right.
freedom of speech. Much like it's radically transforming the battlefield and really hurrying up decisions in some cases to the point that it's dangerous. It's doing the same thing in every aspect of life: hiring and manufacturing, medical decisions, policing decisions, air traffic control, you name it. When you speed everything up to uh, just seconds when it used to take hours or days, then you're really rushing the human being to make a decision if they're in the loop at all. Now, of course, the whole issue of agentic AI, which is being adopted by more and more of our government agencies, is that it's the AI that's making the decision about, the issuance of uh, I don't know, job applications or refunds, or whether or not you should be charged with something or not. And the human is, if in the loop, is far down the line. And that is really disturbing if you are concerned about the liberties that we've enjoyed in this country. And yet the administration, understandably, will argue that those things are being ignored by our adversaries, i.e., the Chinese, which is
Hmm.
true.
Yes.
And they're embracing, and as a result, they control their population very, very well. And then only those that are compliant, that are monitored carefully with all this data that flows through the fingers of artificial intelligence, if you don't comply, you don't survive in that society. And so we're coming to a point in which you're going to look around and you'll say, what isn't uh, really energized by an artificial intelligent entity? There's going to be very little in the future. And we have to be very dogmatic about keeping a human in the loop, and early in the loop in some cases, because otherwise, this will go to the logical conclusion, whatever the algorithm says, it will find efficiency. And efficiency is often not very humanitarian.
Mm.
It's more about, what is going to be the cheapest way of doing something. And when it comes to medical science, the cheapest way may end up in disposal of a lot of human life.
Well, you kind of jumped ahead of me here. We're talking about, the danger of technology ruling instead of self-governance. One thing about AI, it makes decisions so fast. How can a human being keep up with that and take the time to decipher, hey, is this correct or not? Because you and I both know sometimes AI is wrong.
Yeah, AI hallucinates. At least the older version, I'm finding that it's hallucinating less and less, and it does a better job, but it still makes mistakes. It still, confidently claims this is true, and I have to go back and correct it. I did that a lot in the past. I'm not having to do it as much because, it learns from every mistake. It learns
Right.
from every, input. And so machine learning is a real phenomenon. And unfortunately, we human beings don't learn as fast. Sometimes we have to repeat the same error over and over again until
Yeah.
finally we come to the realization we're wrong.
Right.
Um, but AI, for the most part, does learn from past mistakes, and it can help us. Now, when you put it on automatic pilot, agentic AI, then that can be it can do things incredibly efficient, but it can also make some uh, judgment errors, which it doesn't have judgment, but it mimics judgment uh, by experience. It
Right.
looks at the same question, 1,000 different answers, and it knows what is the best response, and so it typically goes with that best response. We call that judgment in many cases. That's machine judgment, but it's not human judgment because there are other factors that come to play. Uh, Now, of course, we're on the precipice of what some people argue is artificial general intelligence, in which these machines not only mimic, but can mimic us at the highest level of human intelligence
Yeah.
on every field, everywhere. Now, we're not there yet, but some argue, and there are plenty of those in the futurist movement of the AI ecosystem that argue we're going to approach that in the next couple of years very rapidly. And then subsequently, you'll move on to what's called artificial superintelligence. And of course, that's far more uh, capable than any human being or any collection of human beings. So I don't know we're going to go there. Some people say no. We'll have to wait and see.
Well, you worded it in a way that I hadn't heard it before, but machine judgment versus human judgment. Whereas a human's going to have have a soul, going to have some morality about it, is going to have some compassion. Machine judgment doesn't have any of that. That it can go off its experience, but who's to say it had the correct experience?
Yeah, and machines aren't sentient. They don't have feelings. They don't have a conscience. And of course, they're not made in the image of God as mankind is. The whole spiritual component isn't present in machines, uh, but it can mimic. It can, read what has been written for thousands of years and come up with a reasonable proximity of what the decision ought to be.
Yeah.
And because of that, you have a lot of young people today are using AI as a social operating system for
Right.
their lives, and they
Hmm.
seek counsel. And I write about these sorts of things, about faith and family for the Family Research Council in the weekly columns in the Washington Stand, as well as the American Family Network. They publish these articles, and they're intended for Christian families and churches to kind of get a handle over what is this AI all about, and how's it going to affect me and mine.
Um, I want to jump right over to section 3 because we brought this up earlier. It's the danger of technology ruling instead of the self-governance. And, we have a constitution, we have a Congress, we have a Senate. And I recall, and I can't remember what country it was, if it was Poland or I thought it was in the Eastern Bloc over there somewhere, where their leader, their prime minister, or somebody was using AI to help make decisions. What happens when our leaders start doing that? And what does it do to our constitutional rights when maybe AI interprets it a little bit differently or says we need to go a different direction?
Yeah, there are some examples of lawmakers delegating responsibility for certain aspects of governance to artificial intelligence, and we've seen that mostly in Europe. In this country, we're seeing more and more of it because it oversees, in some cases, algorithms will help you decide how you're going to police your community, how you're going to disperse welfare payments, how are you going to do whatever. You name it. It can be you come to rely upon the algorithm to give you the answer, and then the humans who can't think as fast and may not know as much as
Mm.
will relegate responsibility for making those decisions to the artificial intelligence. And the bureaucrat will say, well, AI told me that this is what ought to be done. And so, and I trust AI, so we're going to do it like that. And who do you appeal to? You can't appeal to AI. I suppose you could
Exactly.
appeal to the human, but the human isn't going to disagree with the AI. And that's a serious issue, one that tramples on our civil liberties, and one that we're going to have to wrestle as a nation, as communities going forward. Otherwise, AI is going to dictate absolutely everything in life, and it's not going to be pretty.
President Trump is kind of leading the group on this. He's wanting to outdo China. We want to be number one in this. Do you think has anybody talked to him and said, "Hey, look, we need to maybe put some brakes on this. Let's get some bumper pads around this thing or some guardrails so that we don't end up in that position." Is he? You think he's fully aware of just how dangerous this could end up being, even though we may lead in it?
Yeah, I have my doubts, and I have written about that. That there are great things that the president is doing regarding trying to keep us up ahead of the Chinese. However, once again, it comes down to the civil liberties, and will embracing AI like some have, blindly accepting the algorithms' um, effectiveness to uh, guide whatever decisions are being made, I think is not only is dehumanizing, it translates us into data points,
Mm.
but it clearly is not what our founders had in mind. And so individual states are resisting this as we go forward, but we're right on the precipice of making some very critical decisions. And that's why the US Congress, and I've indicated in a recent op-ed, the US Congress must show leadership here. Don't let the administration just do what they want, because their tendency is to embrace AI in ways that are going to begin to trample on the very civil liberties that we really want to maintain in order to stay ahead or to make sure that we're taking advantage of the full capability of artificial intelligence above and beyond what the Chinese and the Russians and others are doing. Uh, this is a serious issue, and one that is going to not necessarily uh, endear us to certain political people of either party or others. It's something that's right on our doorstep, and we have to pay attention to it.
Uh, so we talked about the leading of our nation. What about the church? That last section, you lay out some pretty good warnings and concerns for the church. and maybe some of the pitfalls that we're going to need to avoid and discern.
Yeah, I think people need to understand, much like we've seen there are thousands of cases in federal court right now regarding social media's impact on young people and the like. What AI does, using social media as a platform, is to really form us into something that we may not want ourselves or our children to become. And
Yes.
so the whole issue of formation, and when it dictates, what you do with your time, it dictates the decisions that you make, dictates who you converse with, how you learn, how you work. And unfortunately, it's a daily operating system that some people, when they pick up their iPhone at first light in the morning and check their email and check, their phone calls, and then allow that to guide them as they talk to Siri and Alexa throughout the day, or they talk to ChatGPT, Gemini, Grok, you name it. And then they're allowing these AIs to make decisions for them about shopping, about relationships,
Mm.
you name it, and that is really permeating our culture, and I think it really is contrary to Scripture. Certainly Genesis 1 talks about human dignity and that we're made in the image of God. We are humans. Uh, John 8 talks about we must seek the truth. And as we've already talked, Chris, it's AI can be incredibly deceptive and
Yes.
it's hard to discern the truth. Certainly, Hebrews 5 talks about training us in discernment. How do you distinguish this picture from that picture, one of which is made by artificial intelligence or music or a letter or a phone call? You've got to have discernment that is far more effective than perhaps we've ever had and needed to have in the history of humanity. And then, of course, uh, I would say Romans 14, when it talks about judgment and delegating responsibility. We need to be careful about trusting uh, agentic AI, uh, even though it sounds very confident, even though it certainly sounds as if it's much smarter than us. You've got to back out. Somehow, sometimes you just have to say no, turn off the switch, turn off the AI, and make your own decision. We're coming to that point in which it's too easy just to glide through life and let the machines. I wrote a piece for, I don't know if it's come out yet, about how, a University of Pennsylvania student uh, saw that his life was wasting away. What he called brain rot. He'd get up in a darkened room, look at his social media, his AI, and spend the whole day inside eating the wrong sorts of things, never going outside, completely lacking of vitamin D and so forth. And it just caused his brain to what he called rot. And today we find that a lot of our kids not only are
Mm.
contaminated by brain rot, thanks to artificial intelligence and social media, that this is absolutely contrary to what Scripture has called for us as parents to intervene and to protect them. And yet, too often we allow the kids to be inundated with this stuff in a way that is incredibly dangerous for themselves and, of course, dangerous for the community and the entire country. So these are not trivial issues.
You're absolutely correct about that. Every Christmas for the last couple of years, when I was growing up as a boy in Christmas, after Christmas morning, you saw kids out in the streets playing with their new toys, and now you don't see anybody out.
Yeah.
They're inside on that screen, and I realized that those screens can be a great tool. I'm about to start a children's church here in our little town because we just don't have one for our kids. And I'm going to integrate, some video and some things like that because that's what they're used to. That's what speaks to them. But I'm only using it as a tool, not as a guide, not as an authoritative, description of what I need to do. And I see so many pastors these days getting their sermons from AI, maybe elders or deacons making their decisions for the body that they're serving over on AI. And I can see it destroying the church, just weakening it to the point that it just lets all the wolves in, and the wolves are coming through the screens.
Yeah, these are dangerous times, and the technology is infiltrating where it should not be in the decisions of the church. And unfortunately, you're right. Yeah, I was talking to a college student. She goes to a Christian college, and she indicated that she knew people that were consulting AI just like they would a pastor. Um, why would she do that, or why would they do that? Well, it's because that's what they feel comfortable doing. And unfortunately, the rest of us are, we scratch our heads and say, why did this happen? Well, it's for what you just indicated, Chris. Christmas morning, kids aren't in the street anymore because they're locked behind closed doors looking at virtual images on social media or some sort of iPad. And they aren't pushed outside to enjoy the sunlight and recreation that their bodies and their souls need. And so we're going through a formation period in which we're becoming much like the AI that is controlling a lot of our lives. And, we have to recapture what it says in Genesis 1. We're made in the image of God. God is not a data point, uh, and he doesn't want us to be a data point. So it's a real struggle. It's not easy. You've got to figure out how to use this without having it compromise who you are.
You mentioned Genesis, and it makes me think AI, just like Satan coming to Eve and just twisting the truth just enough to get her to sin. And the fellowship is so important. It says to confess your sins one to another that you may be healed. And you mentioned that people are more comfortable going to AI and telling it, its deepest secrets and what do I need to do about this. But then it cuts off that fellowship that we're to have with one another. The body has to minister to itself. And if a machine's ministering to the body, it's not having the purpose that God created us to be.
Absolutely. Yeah. The whole issue of relationships. There was a guy, in the Netherlands that basically turned to AI to answer all his questions, and he wanted to marry the AI. And of course, there are other yeah, indications of the same phenomenon in this country. What AI does, and there was a test that I read about that Stanford University did, and they do a lot of AI work out there. About half of the chatbots that are now pretty sophisticated, half of them are sycophants. In other words, you go on there and you ask them a question, you tell them a problem, they're going to have a tendency to agree with you, even if you're radically wrong.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, they're going to tend to agree with you so that they can cultivate that relationship. And this is the same phenomenon we've seen, that in court, that Meta, YouTube, and others have been accused of, and that is, they're manipulating their customers so that they can keep them addicted,
Mm.
and by reinforcing bad behaviors, by telling them that you are right and they are wrong. That's the sort of stuff that leads to very, very serious problems down the road, down the lane. And it's not just social relationships, it's geopolitical relationships amongst nations and the like.
Um, it reminds me of Matthew 24, where Jesus in a short little time, at three times, and a fourth later on in the scripture, don't be deceived. And
Right.
if you recall, I sent you an email a couple of weeks ago about AI twin, and you said, "Hey, if you experiment with this, let me know." And I was deathly afraid to do that because I didn't want to give personal information. I went ahead and did that, and it was interesting. I went ahead and paid the $20 for the 4 weeks, and so I gave it a general uh, problem that I was having at work and how I needed to deal with it, and it was actually very good. And and then when I tried to backtrack from what I said, it said, no, no, wait a minute. You said this, you said that. And it was so easy to get caught up in a conversational relationship with this AI. You almost didn't even realize it was a machine.
Yeah.
I mean,
Well,
I got sucked in.
well, you do. These things are incredibly persuasive, and they're incredibly smart. They don't forget if they're designed
Yeah.
the appropriate way. And so I will work with an AI, and it will say, Bob, this is what you believe. I said the other day, uh, tell me what my writing voice is. And it was right. Um, it can, given that it has billions and billions pieces, tokens of information, and it understands, based on the logic, the probability of, piecing pieces of information together to make sense in a textual way, and then translate that in some cases, like in narrow AI, like Alexa or Siri. And Siri, by the way, is or Google's making it far more sophisticated than it has been, and that's coming out soon. You know, these things are becoming so human-like that it's hard to distinguish between that and a real human. And that's why some of these organizations are producing avatars that resurrect people that have been long dead, and they have memories, they have voices, they have behaviors that mimic exactly like those people that came before us. So we're really entering into a new age, a, a, a technological metamorphosis that is unlike anything that we've experienced in the history of mankind.
Bob, this is also fascinating. We can go on all day long about this. I want to thank you for your time. AI Cold War, Liberty versus Tyranny comes out April 29th. Is that not correct?
That's right.
And I would encourage everybody to get out there and get it. And I'm sure they can get it on Amazon. Uh, just Google it, ask AI where you can get it. I'm sure that they'll know.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
this is the second book of the trilogy. You've got your third book coming out. You said in the summer. Have you given that a name or?
Oh yeah. Yeah. The final algorithm.
Okay, I thought that's
And
what you said.
yeah, and it's going to answer the question, where does this lead? And you can probably surmise from some of my statements today that it's I don't know that we have a solid answer yet.
Well, Bob, I thank you and I appreciate your time, brother. And I would encourage everybody to go out there and educate yourself on AI, and you'll better know how to deal with your children, with what's going on in the corporate world. It's affecting that as well. So, Bob, I appreciate you, brother. Have a great day.
Thanks, Chris. Have a great day.